9:30, and it's time for the Rocket Man, Drew DeArmond from 97.7 ESPN Radio in Huntsville, where he is the co-host of Talkin Ball weekday mornings from 7 to 9 there in the Rocket City, and he joins us most Tuesdays at 9:30 to go in-depth on different sports topics, and we always have a lot of fun with Drew, and don't necessarily solicit calls, but a lot of times people will call in and want to talk to Drew, so if you want to, 205-342-9904, you're welcome to do so. Good morning, Drew.
Morning, Gary. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, my friend. I'm battling this stuff like a lot of people are, and I thought I was better, and then kind of relapsed last night. But we'll get through it, pal. Let's start with basketball because, I mean, reality is sometimes harsh, and it's not an excuse when you point out that Alabama had 7 scholarship players dressed Saturday against Arkansas. Took the Hogs down to the wire, but, that's a lot to overcome, man, and they couldn't do it. And now tonight against Tennessee, you hope Beetle Bolden can give them some minutes, but we're not for sure if he can or how many he'll be able to play. And, they're going to be shorthanded for a while with Herbert Jones out. And, of course, obviously 2 players before the season even started with Gary and Rojas knee injuries, and then Quinterly not getting eligible. So no excuses, but it's a tough deal when you run out there with 7 scholarship players, Drew. That's just the hard take on what this Alabama basketball team is dealing with.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they kind of took a knife to a gunfight the other night. They battled and really had a chance to win 69-66, but didn't have enough gas left in the tank to close it out defensively. What they needed was all SEC level performances by Kyra Lewis and John Petty, which they didn't get. Kyra had a decent game, 12 points, but he did have and 3 assists, but did have 7 turnovers. And went 0 for 5 from 3, played the full 40 minutes. John Petty had 8 points, 3 of 8 shooting, but he was, 1 for 5 from the 3-point line. He didn't have his usual, 16 to 18 points. If you had gotten the production that you expect out of those 2, then I think Alabama gets the win, of course. But that's, Arkansas, to their credit, that's who they focused on. Eric Musselman said after the game that they were going to focus on John Petty and Kyra Lewis. They were going to, just dare the other guys to beat them. Jaden Shackelford had a tremendous game, 28 points. Solid game from Alex Reese with 14. They got more out of Javian Davis than they have been getting with 11, but they just needed more production out of their 2 best players. It didn't happen, and they lose a close one to Arkansas. Arkansas's kind of got Alabama's number. They've not, lost to Alabama since 2014, so the Tide has been struggling against the Razorbacks, but they've got to put that in the past. You've got to learn from it, but you just got to go on to the next game because they've got 10 games left, Gary, and I think they've got to go 8-2 or 7-3 to feel like they're in the conversation for the NCAA tournament headed to Nashville for the SECs. They've got 5 games at home, 5 games on the road, and they just got to take them one at a time. And the first challenge is going to be Tennessee coming up tonight at 6 o'clock in Coleman Coliseum. Yeah,
no doubt about it. And I think you're right. I mean, I think probably 7-3 minimum. So that, again, I always hate using this term, but it is what it is. This is a must-win tonight at home against Tennessee. I mean, you just you have to win this game. Whether you're – I liked what Nate Oates said, whether we're injured or sick or whatever, we still got to play better. And he doesn't beat around the bush. And I really love his demeanor. I said this earlier when we were playing some comments from him from yesterday. I mean, nobody's going to feel sorry for you, and he doesn't want anybody to feel sorry for you. He knows they were shorthanded, but if they'd played better down the stretch, they could have won that game against Arkansas. And tonight, same thing. You've got to play a good game and win this game if you're going to keep holding on to hopes of making it in an NCAA tournament.
Well, even the NIT. I mean, you've got to continue to win games and try to get to the postseason. But they've lost so many games to injury. It's not an excuse. It's a fact. I mean, not many teams could withstand the kind of losses they've had. They would be struggling as well. Herbert Jones means so much to this team because he's as good a defender as there is in the SEC, Gary. He's also an outstanding rebounder, and he's found ways to score. He's averaging around 10 points per game, so he would have, been a guy that probably would have helped, offensively as well. He would have been able to get putbacks. He would have been able to get out in the open floor. He's someone you have to account for offensively and defensively. So his loss, and he could have helped contain Mason Jones. Not so sure that young man would have gone for 30 if Herbert Jones had been healthy. So, but again, you can't make excuses. I like Nate Oates and what he said. I mean, you have to play, you have to sustain the effort, and hopefully they'll get Beetle Bolden back because when you have Beetle, he has the capability of getting double figures in a game, Gary. He can provide you three-point shooting, also ball pressure, and really with Alabama matching up with Tennessee tonight, Alabama does need to push the tempo because this is the Tennessee team without their best guard, Lamonte Turner. They're a bigger team, so they're going to want to slow the tempo down. Alabama needs to push the pace and try to get Tennessee to play at their speed.
Drew DeArmond with us talking some basketball here. The Alabama Crimson Tide taking on Tennessee tonight, 6 p.m. the tip at Coleman Coliseum. ESPNU will televise. You can hear the game on our sister station, the Bear 95.3, with Chris Stewart, Brian Passink, Roger Hoover, and Tom Stipe. I want to go around the SEC in basketball a little bit before we close out this segment. One more question on Alabama, and I know there's just, best case scenario is that Herb Jones, Oates has not ruled it out. Drew, do you think Herb can get back this season and play?
Well, I mean, certainly last year Dante Hall had a similar injury and was back in 2.5 weeks. It is Herb's shooting hand, so it's a broken bone in his wrist. He had to have surgery. They're hoping to get him back in 3 weeks. I looked at the rest of the schedule. You've really got 5 weeks before the SEC tournament. And if I'm Alabama, I'm just hoping that I can get him back maybe before the end of the regular season, get him acclimated back with the team, and have him for Nashville. So this team's going to kind of have to tread water during that period of time. Like I said, I still think 8-2 or 7-3. It would be something to shoot for if you're Alabama. Certainly, they're going to have a difficult opponent coming up with LSU coming to Coleman Coliseum, but I still think Alabama could win that game in Coleman if they played at an exceptionally high level. It's going to be very difficult, but certainly I think it's a winnable game. If you chalk it up on the road, it's going to be very difficult to win at Auburn, very difficult to win at Mississippi State. But then you have road trips to Ole Miss, to Georgia coming up this Saturday, which is probably going to be a huge swing game for Alabama. And then you've got, a road game at Missouri. So I think you need to protect your home court and try to steal 2 or 3 of them on the road. I still think it's possible, but it's just going to be guys like John Petty and Kyra Lewis. Kyra Lewis, I know, has aspirations of leaving early for the NBA, and he's a very talented player, Gary. As fast a guy end-to-end as you're ever going to see. But if he is truly ready for the NBA, he needs to have a stretch drive these next 10 games and prove that and play at a very high level, all SEC level for Alabama. If he and John Petty get it going again, if you can get Jaden Shackelford to continue to produce from his guard spot, and then get some offense like we saw from Alex Reese and Javian Davis against Arkansas, then I think this Alabama team could go on a run like that again. But there's just very little margin for error left, and certainly if they could get Herbert Jones back down the stretch, it would be huge.
Drew, if you get Herbert back, what kind of chance do you give Alabama of making a deep run in the SEC tournament, potentially maybe getting themselves in position to win that and get the automatic bid to the NCAA?
Well, I mean, it's going to depend on the matchups, Gary. I think Alabama can play with anyone in the league. They nearly won in Rupp Arena against Kentucky. They've already blown Auburn out at home. It will be on a neutral floor. You will not be in Auburn Arena, so Auburn Arena gives the Tigers an unbelievable advantage. Certainly, you would also have LSU on a neutral floor. I think on a neutral floor, this Alabama team could play with anyone in the country, anyone in the SEC, because you look at their strength of schedule, they played the toughest schedule in the league. So if you can get those 9 guys healthy, if you can get Beetle back and get him rolling, and then if you can get Herbert Jones back, I think Alabama would be a dark horse. I think they could definitely win 2 games, maybe 3 in the SEC tournament, and that might go, a very long way in helping Alabama reach the postseason, whether it be the NCAA tournament or the NIT. But right now, they just need to worry about Tennessee and getting this win, and then going on the road and winning in Athens. But certainly I think they're very capable. They've not been getting blown out. I know they got soundly whipped by LSU, who's playing extremely good basketball. But now that we know what we know, I mean, you didn't have Beetle Bolden. He was ill. And then Herbert Jones gets sick. So you didn't have all your bullets against LSU. So credit to the Bayou Bengals for getting the win. But this Alabama team just needs to get healthy.
Drew DeArmond with us talking some hoops. This league, Drew, there's no bell cow. You know, there's not a dominant team this year that you're looking at and saying, wow, they're just head and shoulders above everybody else. What do you think of this league? Good league, mediocre league, bad league? What do you think of the SEC?
Well, I think it's pretty good. I don't think it's been as good as the last 2 years. I think the bottom is weaker, and maybe the top, there's not an outstanding team. Last year you thought Kentucky, Tennessee, had a chance to maybe make a Final Four run. I don't know if there's a team right now that you think's capable of that. Auburn certainly got hot and made that Final Four run for the SEC last year, nearly getting to the national championship game. I don't know that there's a team that's that elite in the SEC right now, but there's a lot of basketball left to be played. But I don't think college basketball is as good this year, Gary. I think there's probably 10 to 15 teams that can win the national championship. The ACC is way down this year. It's down even more than the SEC. They might only get 3 teams in, Gary, probably 4, maybe 5. But when you think about the ACC, it's usually a powerhouse. North Carolina's not having the year that they had envisioned. Virginia is on the bubble right now, the defending national champions. So we'll see. But I think the SEC probably can get 6 teams in, but they need to pick it up. But I don't know if there's a dominant team. Right now, I would say the 3 best teams in this league are Auburn, LSU, and Kentucky. But Mississippi State, I'm anxious to see them play tonight. They're on a winning streak. They're playing much better than they did when Alabama shellacked them in Coleman Coliseum early. But they're going to Rupp Arena. We'll see if they can get that win. They really should have won in Baton Rouge. Skylar Mays saved the Bayou Bengals. But right now, I'd say the SEC is a pretty good league, probably in that top 3 in the power, as far as when you look at the power rankings. But the Big Ten is far and away the best league this year.
All right, 9:43. Drew DeArmond with us. He's going to stick around for another segment. We're going to come back on the other side and get into a little baseball talk about this Alabama baseball team. Coach Bo in his 3rd year. He feels a lot better about his club, but in the SEC, there's so many teams that are ahead of Alabama. We'll discuss that. And also National Signing Day Part 2 tomorrow. I'll get Drew's thoughts on those remaining targets for Alabama and where he thinks they wind up. We'll do that next here on the Gary Harris Show on Tide 100.9 FM. The Rocket Man out of Huntsville. National Signing Day tomorrow, Drew. Alabama's got a top 3 class, it looks like, regardless, but would like to finish strong. And, of course, the number 1 target, I don't think there's any doubt, is McKinley Jackson, the massive defensive tackle out of George County High School in Lucedale, Mississippi. I said this morning, and I want to get your take on where you think he winds up. It seems to me, reading these different recruiting sites, that he's trending to Texas A&M, but we'll find out for sure on Wednesday. What's your feeling on where McKinley Jackson winds up?
As of yesterday, that's what I was hearing as well, that it seemed that Texas A&M might have the slight edge. I think Alabama's still battling there, certainly. And you never know how things are going to go because last year around this time, he ended up being a freshman All-SEC selection. Certainly would have helped Alabama, but Henry To'oto'o, of De La Salle High School in Concord, California, was thought to be, leaning to Alabama and get a sign with the Crimson Tide. Then on Wednesday, you get up and all the momentum's with Tennessee. He ends up signing with the Vols and is going to be a big piece of the puzzle for Jeremy Pruitt for the next 2 to 3 years. So you never know. I know Alabama spent a long time recruiting McKinley Jackson. I definitely. They've already got a great class. He would kind of be the cherry on top, and you could pair him with Tim Smith, the defensive tackle from, Sebastian River, Florida. Now, it's kind of unusual to me that a kid growing up in Lucedale, Mississippi, would end up at Texas A&M, who is the picture of mediocrity when it comes to the SEC. They haven't done much so far under Jimbo Fisher in the first 2 seasons. They had a 4-loss season, followed that up with a 5-loss year. I don't know. I know they're recruiting pretty well, but I don't know how much traction they've actually made. They certainly, have to jump over Alabama, Auburn, and LSU, and I don't think there's a guarantee that'll happen. And again, I think it's always historically tough to get kids out of Mississippi, but this has kind of been the perfect storm because Ole Miss and State are going through coaching changes at this time. And you would have thought Alabama bringing in Freddie Roach, a guy that he had a great relationship with while he was heavily considering the Rebels, would help the Tide. I think it has, but we'll just have to see. These next 24 hours are going to be interesting. But if you had to ask me, I would say that McKinley Jackson likely ends up at Texas A&M. And if he does, you make your own conclusions, but I think we all know what happened.
Cedric Van Pran, the big center out of New Orleans, longtime Georgia commitment, but with Sam Pittman leaving to become the head coach at Arkansas, it kind of opened things back up with him. Alabama, any shot there?
I doubt it. I think Von Pran's going to stay committed to Georgia. He's been committed to them throughout the process. Unlike, McKinley Jackson. McKinley a couple years ago committed to LSU and reopened his recruiting process. Von Pran never really had much interest in going to LSU, though he's from New Orleans. Sam Pittman had a huge impact on him getting him to Georgia. But Arkansas's program is struggling right now. It was going to be hard to flip him from Georgia to Arkansas. I think Von Pran will probably still go to Georgia. Matt Luke's a great recruiter in his own right, has an outstanding reputation in that area. So I'm sure they've spent a lot of time on him. Sounds like he had a good official visit there. Now I think Alabama, you might give them still watch them a little bit, but I would still say with a lot of positivity that I think that Von Pran will end up in Athens.
Enos Rakestraw, the defensive back out of Texas, kind of been a late bloomer. Alabama's been involved. What do you think happens with him?
Well, I think he's probably going to end up at Missouri. I mean, he has a outstanding relationship with the defensive coordinator Ryan Walters. There's been some turmoil in Texas program, with Tom Herman and what he's trying to get accomplished. He's lost some traction in that state, and of course, Ennis is from Duncanville, Texas. I do think Alabama liked Enos Rakestraw, but I'm not sure that they have a scholarship or a spot for him. Even if they lost McKinley Jackson, I think you would have to see a guy like Malachi Moore, who was supposed to early enroll and has been delayed. I think he would end up coming in instead of maybe potentially gray shirting for Alabama, the defensive back from Hewitt-Trussville. I think he would come in for the University of Alabama in this summer. Also, I think Alabama will probably gray shirt Caden Clark, the Ohio signee from Akron, Ohio, the tight end. He tore two knee ligaments, I think his ACL and his MCL in his knee during his senior year, but I think they'll probably count him forward to 2021. But I think if at all possible, Nick Saban doesn't want to have many gray shirts in this class. He's looking forward to building another strong 2021 group. So I think that's why they went all in on McKinley Jackson. So I would have liked to have seen them have a contingency plan like Princely Maylene, who I think is an underrated defensive lineman from Maynard, Texas.
All right, Drew, that kind of leaves the guys then that are committed. It looks like in terms of Alabama signing players tomorrow, especially if they don't get Jackson. These guys that are committed, let's run them down real quickly because I want to ask you about baseball. But Jamil Burrows, Javon Baker, and Damian George all wind up in Tuscaloosa?
Yes, Damian George, I strongly believe, is already signed. It'll be announced tomorrow officially, though, by Alabama. And then Jamil Burrows, Javon Baker from McEachern in Georgia. Both of them are really good players. Both had academic concerns, but I think Alabama has plans for both. And if they don't get McKinley Jackson, it would certainly be significant if they could get Jamil Burrows in school. He had a very good senior season and is a good player in his own right. And, again, would be paired with Tim Smith. And I think it's a really good group overall, a lot of defensive talent coming in. Now we'll see if Nick Saban can fix that defensive coaching staff.
And Jason Jones, the big lineman out of Calera, it appears strongly that he is going to wind up going out of state. Is that what you think happens?
I'll be surprised if he doesn't end up with Mario Cristobal at Oregon. I've heard one of his high school teammates is going to be preferred walk-on there. Mario wants to continue to have a presence in the state of Alabama for obvious reasons. He had a very good run here as a recruiter, and, of course, in the future, I'm sure he'd like to be considered for the Alabama job. He's doing a great job. They won the Rose Bowl. He's got the best program out in the Pac-12, but I think right now all the tea leaves are looking at Jason Jones going to Oregon.
All right, great stuff there ahead of National Signing Day from Drew. Drew, baseball here the next last couple of minutes. I went to the luncheon with Coach Bohannon yesterday and his staff. A lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement. They're raising the talent level and going to have a better club. Problem is, when you're in this league and you're where Alabama's at, you got a lot of teams to try to climb over. Clearly you want to make it to Hoover. That's goal number one. I mean, you got to get back in the SEC tournament, and then maybe if you do that, you're in position to get into a regional. I mean, is that fair thinking that at minimum the SEC tournament and possibly maybe a 3 seed in a regional somewhere?
Well, I think so. I think that's reasonable expectations. I think it's going to be a much more talented squad, much more athletic one. I think Sam Prater being back and hopefully healthy behind the plate is going to help Alabama a lot. It'll allow Brett Auerbach to potentially play third base. I know he had a pretty good year at Alabama last year, and historically junior college players really settle in their second season in the SEC. He's somebody that can play a lot of different positions. He can play second. He can catch. But I think third base is where I would also look for him. I think also when you think about returnees, I think Drew Williamson had a really nice freshman year last year. He could play third or first base. I think I thought he showcased a really nice set of hands over there defensively at first. I thought he swung the bat pretty well. And T.J. Reeves, I think he's going to be a sophomore outfielder with a lot of power. I think he could come in, and I think you hope to see him make that jump his second year. And, of course, when you think about the outfielders, I mean, really the guy that had the best year was Tyler Gentry, the junior college transfer from Ball State last year. He had double digits in home runs, hit for a nice average around 300, and you hope to see him have another big year for Alabama. But if Reeves and Gentry can produce along with Prater, the middle of your lineup should be pretty good. I think they're going to have a lot of competition in some of the infield spots. I mean, I've been hearing a lot of good things about the Californian that they signed. Late Jim Jarvis, I think he's somebody that can really play. And I know Zane Denton, they're also high on him. We'll be able to – I'm sure he's going to give a lot of these guys opportunities early when they open the season against Northeastern on the Valentine's Day weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But I'm anxious to see also what's going to really define this team and whether or not they can go on a run is the pitching. Certainly Garrett Roop should be much healthier now and settle in. I think he's probably going to be a part, if not the rotation, then a big part of the bullpen, no doubt about it. But it's really going to be those two newcomers. Of course, it's going to be left-hander Connor Pralique from Wisconsin, really one of the better pitchers on the East Coast. He turned down some professional opportunities to come to Alabama. And then a guy that turned down 17th round money from a left-hander from Canada, Antoine Jean. I'm really excited to see him as well. He's another lefty. So, and then Dylan Smith, he came in from the state of Texas last year. He turned down the Padres. He really saw most of his action, from the bullpen. How much progress has he made? So Jason Jackson's pitching staff, how healthy they are and how much progress they've made. I think that's going to define this team. But I do think they'll be better. But like you said, Gary, you're talking about a shark tank. SEC baseball is by far the toughest. And if Alabama can get to Hoover, if you can get to Hoover and get to that step first, then you have a chance to perhaps get to a regional. And if Coach Bohannon can get to a regional in year 3, where I think everybody ought to know he took over a disaster of a roster, and it's been a rebuild that was going to be a little slow, but I think we're starting to see the fruits of his recruiting labor. I think Alabama is going to be improved this year if they can stay healthy.